Okay, well, welcome to the Houston Museum of African American Culture. My name is John Guest, and I'm the CEO. We're thrilled to have you here. Thank you, thank you. We're thrilled to have you here today to talk about an important topic, and we're thankful again that Texas Southern University and the Prairie View A&M University debate teams are here to help our community get started in this conversation. This year, there are at least 3 topics that we want to have at the museum. The others we'll announce later, but they are all topics that are humming around the community that we're just not talking about openly. And I know as a black male, being candid and honest, that black women's empowerment is something that leaves you a little bit, what quite is that? How is that working? In today's world, you cannot miss the constant flow of black women empowerment workshops, programs, and events filled with female gurus suggesting that black girl magic will somehow change the dynamic of glass and racial ceilings in corporate America. Many imply that through hard work, black women empower themselves in ways that combat the dearth of economic opportunity in the mainstream economy for the vast majority of black entrepreneurs, male or female. Skeptic or not, you cannot deny the progress, the continuing empowerment of black women, and it's refreshing. Black women never had the luxury of being taken care of. They were too busy taking care of themselves and others. So this modern day phenomena of them feeling good about themselves, of being able to define the party and show up and show off, is way overdue and undoubtedly deserved. The whispered background talk, of course, is about what this empowerment means for black men. Because we don't quite know how to talk about this openly and get clarity, the whispered uncertainty seems to play itself out in less than positive interactions between black men and black women, where we look at each other's faults and are somehow adept at understanding our perceived shortfalls and not our mutual attractiveness. Time will tell if the current black women's empowerment movement will actually succeed, and if it does, will it impact all of us positively? Are African American women the future of progress? Let the debate begin. I'll now bring up our debate coordinator, Michaela Reed, who will give us who will be our debate coordinator and timekeeper who will address the debate teams. And by the way, thank you Prairie View, thank you TSU, thank you Coach Luster, thank you Coach Baptiste. Thank you, of course, our esteemed debate coach, Dr. Thomas Freeman, for being in the house. We really appreciate it every year. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Just waking everybody up this morning. I would like to welcome you to the great debate. For years, the Houston Museum of African American Culture has brought many issues to the forefront of the community, causing us to evaluate and take action. Today, we have Prairie View A&M University and Texas Southern University here to evaluate the result. Are African American women the future of progress? The tournament format for parliamentary debate consists of 6 speeches. First, the first proposition constructive speech, 7 minutes. First opposition constructive speech, 8 minutes. Second proposition constructive speech, 8 minutes. Second opposition constructive speech, 8 minutes. Opposition rebuttal, 4 minutes. And proposition rebuttal, 5 minutes. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Texas Southern University and Prairie View University as HMAAC presents the great debate.
Now, without further ado, I would like to extend a blanket of thank yous to the gallery for coming out to support today, and I hope that you'll be able to offer some fair judgment. Of course, to my opponents, hopefully you'll be able to offer some good clash, and of course to my partner, the Robin to my Batman. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the resolution, but first, I would like to start off with a reference to a famous poem many of you might know called Bridge Builder. It references an old man who goes along a lone highway, and then he comes along, he meets this stranger, and this stranger says, "Why are you building this bridge? You've already crossed the chasm that's deep and wide." And he said, "I'm building this bridge for those who come after me, to be able to lay a foundation for those who are to come after, have a safe travel." So with that being in mind, we're going to establish status quo, which is that African American women have the unique experience that is oftentimes unfair of being not only a minority, but also being an extremely oppressed group in America, seeing that we have to not only fight on the forefront for feminism, but also for black rights. So with that being stated, we're going to go ahead and look at the resolution, which states African American women are the future of progress. We're going to define African American women as people who identify as women, the gender women as also black. With that being said, we look at future, and we're going to define future as that is to be, and progress is to develop a higher or better, more advanced, what is it? Higher, better, more advanced stage. Okay. So with that being stated, we're going to go into our first contention of throughout history. We see that this has remained true. Black women have been at the forefront of all major movements throughout history. We're going to look at it first with slavery. You can look at Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth. Then we look at the women's rights movement, also with Sojourner Truth. Then we look at Callie House, who was the leader of the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief Bounty and Pension Association. We're going to link this to the future and look at it from the aspect of it impacts people today because of the simple fact that this is a platform that many people are running for the presidential election, is will they be giving people, or African Americans, for example, reparations from slavery. With that being said, we're also going to, excuse me for not establishing the value, which is going to be intersectionality, and the criterion, which is going to be preponderance of evidence. Criterion in IPDA or NPDA debate is simply how you will weigh today's round. Whoever has the most evidence, seeing that we chose preponderance of evidence, will win today's round. So with that being said, I'll go back to my first contention. So we look at it from the aspect of also Barbara Jordan. She broke barriers, not only being the first black woman to speak at a DNC event, but also being the first black congressman or woman in Texas. Then we look at it from the aspect, and we can link this back to intersectionality, because not only was she an activist in the black community, but was also a lesbian and was married to a woman, being a political figure. This is something that we see is at the crux of intersectionality, and that's why we're valuing it here today, adjudicators, simply because of the fact that we see that throughout history, black women have been at this crux. Moving forward to our second contingent, that it is never enough. Who is to say that progress has already happened? Who's to say that that we are to stop? Simply because women still don't have equal pay, equal rights to their body. When we see that Planned Parenthood is at an all-time attack right now, when it offers such free resources to women, such as birth control and cervical cancer testing and all these things that you would normally have to have insurance to have, but it caters to minorities and those who do not, and those who are at a disadvantage. Secondly, we see that black people are still getting murdered and gunned down in the streets, that there's still no justice and still no peace within the black community. And we see that black women are still at the forefront of this as well. We look at Lucy McBeth, whose son, Jordan Davis, was recently killed due to police brutality. She did not just sit on her laurels and just take it, but she decided to urge for progress and run for Congress and win. We see that Lucy McBeth is another idol or another example of why we see that black African American women are the future of progress. And the impact is that if we are to rest and settle at a place so far from our destination and say that African American women are not the future of progress, we're simply saying that there's no room left for us to progress. So we see that is a major impact here. Then we look at the third contingent of current leaders. that are African American women. We look at the Black Lives Matter founders. There are two women who started the Black Lives Matter movement. We see that this is a huge movement that reached the entire country. And not just this, we look at also Angela Rye, Angela Davis, major people. Yes, one or two.
Are there not members of other races or genders that also participate in Black Lives Matter and Me Too?
No, I'm talking about the founders. We're saying that they're the future of progression. We're talking about where it started, the foundation, meaning that the foundation started with black women. We see that progression has to start somewhere. And if the founders have created these organizations, yes, it's intended to grow. We welcome growth. But the fact of the matter is it had to start somewhere, and it started with a black woman. With that being said, we also look at the Me Too movement founder of Tawana Burke, whose name is now, the Me Too is now more than just a hashtag, but an extreme movement. We're not arguing that other genders or that other races aren't a part of this, but we're saying that African American women are the spark, are the start, are the foundation of progress. We look at it throughout history, and we have named multiple examples from Sojourner Truth to Callie House. We look at that it is never enough. For who's to say that African American women, as Malcolm X said, the most unprotected, neglected group in America, is at its point of full progression? We have not reached that end goal yet. When so many of us are still gunned down and denying basic rights and equal pay, then we look at our current members, from Black Lives Matter founders to Angela Rye, Angela Davis, the Me Too movement founder, and of course, we look at it from the aspect of all of you today, all the women in the crowd today who are advocating for a conversation to lead to progression. And with that being said, I urge an affirmative ballot. Thank you.
So I'm going to start off today by giving some resolutional analysis. Then I'm going to go into some attacks on the affirmative case, and then go into the negative off case. So when we're talking about the resolutional analysis, it's important to mention that in this debate, the affirmative is bound by the resolution, meaning they must prove African American women as the sole future of progress. Any other group that is proved to be likely or a part of this is grounds for a negative win. Just bear that in mind. Moving on forward into some cases made by, and also when you're talking about the weighing mechanism of preponderance of evidence, it's important to include the fact that you need to consider the quality of this evidence, right? So we want to look at the most compelling and the most compelling arguments that actually support your case, not just how many statistics or facts you can throw out there. So the first contention that the affirmative brought up was that African American women are at the front, and we are the spark. And with that, the negative definitely agrees. However, you have to consider the fact that there are multiple other sparks. There are multiple other key factors and key players in this future. They stated things such as the women's rights when you come to voting, but you think about other players such as Susan B. Anthony and Martin Luther King, who also supported women's rights. You have to consider that as well. Your first question?
When you mentioned that we have to prove that women are the sole founders or innovators or progress or sole, whatever, relating to the resolution, anywhere in the resolution, does it say that African American women are the sole movement of progress?
So the resolution, that's a good question. So the resolution says African American women are the, and that word the implies the sole. You don't say the United States of America as in one of the other United States of America. We know that there's only one. So that the is going to imply sole. So the job of the affirmative in today's round is to prove African American women as the sole future of progress. And the negative is here to contend that there are other groups that will play a role in this. So back to the first contention, like we said, there are other key players when you look at Susan B. Anthony, Martin Luther King. When you look at, they also mentioned intersectionality and equal rights. However, we know that when you're looking into the future, it's not until 2119 until black women are going to get, according to the American Association of University Women, are even going to get equal pay. So how far in the future are we supposed to wait for this progress? The actual future of progress that we will see in our own lifetimes is going to be led by everyone, not just African American women. Moving on into the negative case. So The first contention here is that the future is less binary, right? So in general, what we're seeing in today is that less people are actually identifying solely as men or women. So currently, 390 out of every 100,000 adults, according to the U.S. National Library of Medicine, don't identify as men or women. What does this mean? This means that the future that we're speaking of isn't going to be exclusive to either men or women. And so what we need to do as a society is to include those other factors. We cannot marginalize those groups and claim progress. We cannot continue the oppression of those who are not currently identified and claim progress. We must, in order to claim progress, we must be inclusive. Michelle Obama once said, when she spoke to a room full of Americans of every shade, race, and gender, when they go low, we go high, meaning all of us, and not just one subset of us. The second contention that the negative is here to make is that progress requires allyship. The progress that we are going to see in the future of our lifetimes is going to require people coming across from all ends of the spectrum, gender, race, religion. It's not going to be solely focused on the African American woman. And when you look at even the metaphor that the affirmative set up the round with, talking about an old man who built a bridge, he didn't say, I'm building this bridge for African American women. He's building this bridge for those who come after him, meaning everyone, not just one subset of our population. And when you look at this idea of progress requiring allyship, you'll find that in general, we are stronger when we are all together. You will find that women contain globally 70 to 80% of all consumer goods. So we drive the economy. When this is possible through the multiplier effect of women. So currently, women, we are the providers for our households. We are the ones who are buying things for our children and all of that, not just African American women. So we are stronger economically together than we are apart. Continuing on with that idea, some research by Camber Associates found that in companies with 50% or more women in leadership positions tend to see a higher growth in their earnings per share and a higher return on their assets. That's once again showing that women in general, and regardless of our race, when we combine forces, we are stronger than we are apart. And that is going to be key in today's debate. This debate, what the negative is here to say is that we are stronger together than we are apart. African American women are going to require help from other people. We simply are, but that doesn't take away from their light. It just means that we're sharing that light with other people. You know what the saying goes, what's a king without his queen? Well, what's a queen without her king? We need to also remember Black men and the critical role they play in our society and in the role of progress. America has done enough to separate Black people. They have done enough to pitch our women and our men against each other. What we need to do moving forward is get on the same page and move forward towards a progress that will cover everyone, that will include everyone, and won't leave anyone behind. And with that, I yield the rest of my time.
Since decorum has already been established, I'm just going to hop into the case on the affirmative side, just kind of build up the case and clear up any kind of conflict or any kind of confusion for the case. So just to be sure we know what the resolution is, it's going to be resolved. African American women are the future of progress. So when we think about these definitions that we've already set up, we talked about future being that is to be, that is coming after today, and we define progress as to develop to a higher, better, or more advanced stage. Now, when the negative got up here, they talked about our definition specifically, or they gave a resolution analysis saying that because of the word that the implies that there's that this is a soul that is solely on Black women to be the progress or the future of progress, when we know that this is not true to be how definitions work. We understand that the definition of soul does not exclusively mean soul. So that is a pretty simple understanding of how that definition works. I would like that to flow over on the side of the affirmative case. Now, when we think about what they're talking about, this resolution analysis saying that this implies soul, this is a non-unique. We understand we are here today. We are the Houston African American Museum of Culture because we are here about a conversation surrounding the Black community, correct? We're talking about African American women. So it is not saying that the the burden of progress is solely on African American women, correct? What we're saying is that how are African American women going to be, what do they look like? How are they going to be the future in this progress, in the progress that they talk about being inclusively or including everyone and being involving everyone. So I'm going to go down some of our contentions and also remind you guys what we're valuing and what we're weighing. Our weighing mechanism is going to be preponderance of evidence. Basically, we're just going to give you a lot of evidence, letting you know that proving the Av's case. And our criterion is going to be intersectionality. For those who don't know, intersectionality is a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, where it basically talks about the double fold of being a black and a woman, especially in America. Now, when we think about what it's like to be African American, of course, my partner touched on this a little bit, just to kind of elaborate. African American women live within the confines of not only a violent patriarchal society within our own community, but also within a violent system of racism. So we have a twofold battle. So when we think about the history of African American and our first contention, or the history of black women's involvement in our progress, it has always come from that intersectional kind of viewpoint. When we think about somebody like Sojourner Truth, like she gave us, when we think about people like Callie House, these people were not only working for the betterment of their black community, but also as women wanted to make sure things were better for them. So Sojourner Truth, someone that asked the question, ain't I a woman? Because as we all know, during the slave trade, black women were not looked at as women. They were looked at in the same way as black men were looked at, as cattle, or as what we would say property. So again, when we think about this history of throughout history, African American women has always been a force in progress because we have a very special relationship with our community. We are the carers, the caretakers, the healers of our community. So we have always been inherently in the future because of the works we do today. So to say that we're going to be in the future, we already know this because we understand that what we have done in the past, we have always been a force to be reckoned with, even if it's been in the back on the backstage of things. So when we go down to our second contention, when we think about this hashtag or this tagline of never enough, we cannot set the confines of what that looks like, right? When we think about what is enough, a lot of people may say that someone like Barack Obama is a symbol of racism being over in America, but because we know that that's not how identity politics works or how racism works, it is way more systematic. So we cannot gauge on how much change we actually need. The fruit we grow today is what we're going to reap tomorrow. So when we think about progress is a constant change. It's never going to stop. It's non-ending. So when we think about the rights of a group of people are expressed by this group, they cannot be imposed upon by the very group that benefits from this marginalization. So we do not have a limit. So when we talk about it never being enough, we talk about basically it's not going to be a thing that we can set a cap on. This change is going to be always growing because people change, the world grows and change, and the idea behind gender norms, the idea behind race relations, all of that is always going to be changing as the new generation comes up. I'll take your 1 and 3.
Okay, so if black women, as you've stated, have always been at the forefront of progress, how have you distinguished between today and the future?
What do you mean? How this
As the affirmative, how have you distinguished between the two different time periods of today and the future, if you're saying black women have always been at the forefront of progress?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question, but the way we're framing future is to be, right? So when we think about what black women are doing today, we are not doing things today that are just going to benefit us today, right? We have to do things that are being done for the future to benefit off of. But when we think about I'll tie that into the third contention of what it's looking like in the present today. As my partner said, it's something like Black Lives Matter, such a phenomenal movement that has sparked so much conversation in this country around police brutality, something that benefits black men in a way that it doesn't even benefit black women at times, because we understand that black men are the face of police brutality, even though there are black women that have been victims of police brutality just as well. So when we think about when the negative acts, how does it tie into the what is the difference in the future and the past? When we think about the future, again, these things are not things that are just going to affect us today. We think about the Me Too movement and what that means for future women growing up in America, and what that means for young black women or young black girls when they see that they can have a voice to be an advocate in their community for all the things that we do not talk about in our community. So when we say that black women are the future of progress, it is only because of our intersectionality. It does not give us a chance to rest. Author Melissa Harris Perry talks about the black women existing in America in a crooked room theory. So in this crooked room theory, it understands that because black women operate in the confines of racism and patriarchy, that we have to always be in this crooked room where we cannot sit up straight because this society was not designed for us. In a society designed for white males in America, black women at all times do not have any room to actually stand up straight and be themselves. So when we think about this intersectionality in any kind of way, to negate what the negative was saying, we are inclusive because we are America. We have taken care of America from the time we have been in this country to today. We are still taking care of America. So when you see black women doing these things and making progress, it's going to inspire. It has inspired the Latino community. It has inspired the Muslim community. It inspires women all across America to say, hey, I can be that same woman and speak up for my community. Now, of course, black women have always been inclusive, but we have to be mindful of the specific issues that affect black women specifically. And we have to keep that in mind. If we want to actually heal ourselves, we have to heal. If we want to heal the world, we have to heal ourselves first, right? When you get on an airplane, they tell you to put your face mask on right before you put somebody else's face mask on. So that's what we want to do here. So it is not about what the negation is trying to say about making it about not being inclusive. This is not what it's about. And again, we have to stick to the resolution and the status quo. We're speaking about specifically African American women. So to say we need to reach out and progress is going to involve everyone, that's a non-unique argument because we understand that progress is going to, in order for it to be successful, it is going to have to include everyone. And with that, I do urge a negation ballot.
Without further ado, further delay, I will give you the second negative argument to the resolution resolved. African American women are the future of progress. So I'll start from the top, right? So we talk about in debate, top case, we talk about the resolution. What does it say? That's a point of contention in this debate, so I'll address it. African American women are the future of progress. I want to point out a few things. When I say that something is, that those things are, I ain't saying that is an absolute will happen. Our opponents have to prove to us, and have not yet proved to us beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this is exactly what it's going to be. Second, when we talk about the future, again, we've already explained, beautifully illustrated by my partner, that when we talk about the, it is the singular, the debater from Prairie View A&M, not one of the debaters, not a couple of debaters, but the debater, right? When we talk about future, there's a huge question mark on how our opponents define the term future as what will be. What will be in 100 years, 1,000 years, what will be tomorrow? Giant question mark, not really made clear. And that's where we have a problem in today's debate, because the fact of the matter is the black woman is oppressed. We talked about that in the previous, speech. Our opponents mentioned that black women are facing both racism and patriarchy. Undoubtedly true. In fact, and just to paint a picture of how poorly America treats what is undoubtedly a valuable part of our society, black women. Black women have the highest maternal mortality rate. That is 3 times higher than any other demographic today, right? So in giving birth, black women are not safe. America does not treat black women well. If we know that this is true, and we want to say tomorrow that black women will be the leaders of progress, that is an unfair expectation. Black women have already borne the brunt of oppression in America, and to put a harder burden on black women for tomorrow is greater than any injustice than we've already seen. It is a time for us, as I hope you will, to support black women in ongoing progress, for us to ask black women to lead us again and again. Wholly unfair. It is time for us as a totality of a community, if not just a black community. Black men, where are you? Where will you be if we are not going to be standing beside our black women? Let's move on to the beginning of our value and value criterion debate. Our opponents espouse the value of intersectionality. This is going to be key in the round, audience, because there is a simple idea of intersectionality where different groups overlap, right? Black is not a simple thing. Many different people can be black. You can be Afro-Caribbean or Afro-Latina, to give an example. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Latin women, Latino women, Hispanic women are actually the lowest paid demographic in the United States today. So no, this oppression, where we face racism and patriarchy at the same time, it's faced by all women who are minorities, right? Because oppression does not focus purely on one group of people. I point to you to be really quick with it. There is children that have been placed in cages, right? Like there's oppression beyond just the black community. There's oppression facing all of us, and we don't band together. It's easier for us to be isolated and picked off. Oppressed greater, we have to band together for these reasons. first 2 questions.
Okay, so just add context to the question.
Absolutely.
Are you aware that he adds specific, meaning that, like, so if I say, can you hand me the pen in front of you, does that mean that that's the only pen in the world? Or that's the only pen that exists?
It means that you want me to hand you the pen that you're indicating. One pen. You want one. You want one is what you're asking for. Yes, absolutely. I'll move on. So, first, let's go down the flow. When we talk about contentions, right? Our opponents offer arguments, first referring to the idea that black women have been leading in the past. Undoubtedly true. Our opponents cite Barbara Jordan, a hero, a particular legislator in Austin that I look to, Wilhelmina Delco. She fought for Prairie View to get a fair allocation from Texas A&M when it comes to state funding. Black women are heroes, have been heroes, but the fact of the matter is they have not done this and cannot do this, and they need your support to do these things going forward. Alone, asking black women to do this is wholly unfair. Let's look at the second of these contentions. They claim that black women's progress is never enough. It will not be done, unfortunately. We will always have to be fighting for more and more progress. And again, I will support black women every step of the way. I will support my partner. I will support my teammates. I will support every black woman in this room because you deserve it, because you are a person with, you bearing the image of God. You were created as a person just as well as I am. But the fact that there is never enough progress does not make black women the sole arbiters of said progress. Let's move to contention 3. Our opponents claim that these movements were started by black women. Again, undeniable. But there is an unfortunate, truly unfortunate truth to the idea that without the support of everyone, these movements fail. They don't get the prominence and they don't have the impact that they should. I refer you to womanism, right? A counter to third wave feminism. Feminism, as championed by white women, has known to be exclusive to black women. Wholly unfair. So, black women, being so innovative, being so industrious, womanism is the solution. Let's do a way of champion femininity that includes everyone. But as we see in the status quo, the only champions of womanism in the status quo are black women, because unfortunately, those other women, be it hatred, be it ignorance, aren't supporting black women in that, and they don't have the support that they need to get to the forefront, to have that be a national movement in the way that feminism does. I refer to you again to the march, the Women's March on Washington that we had after the inauguration of President Trump. Wholly excluded black women protested, and the majority white women marched on without them. So without the support of the rest of the community, right, these movements are more or less fruitless, unfortunately. Again, I charge you, as I will charge myself, to show that support that is so necessary. I'll move on to readdress the constructive arguments that we made in the negative that my partner put up. I want to point out to you that there is no offense coming from the affirmative against our arguments that, one, critique the resolution, right? When we talk about non-binary people, this is a growing demographic, a real demographic of other people made in the image of God, born with the same inalienable rights that the rest of us have that are being ignored in this debate, right? These people are the future of progress because it is a new demographic that America is just now recognizing. And to further marginalize and bar them from this discussion is to only exacerbate the kind of marginalization that leads to the rampant violence that we've seen across non-binary folks in the status quo. To move on, my opponent also makes the argument that allyship is necessary. I refer to you to one who we've quoted ad nauseum, Martin Luther King, right? He is one of our greatest leaders, a peace champion, a reverend, a scholar, all of these things, absolutely true. He wrote a letter from the Birmingham jail. And in that letter, he gives a detail of a particular character who plays a role in America. He talks about the white liberal and their necessity to our movement. He says they aren't wholly concerned with the totality of black identity. They don't understand us. They don't particularly care for us. They're kind of self-righteous, right? They're doing a lot of virtue signaling, trying to look cool by standing with the black people. But he said, I will allow them to stand with me. I will allow them to be hosed down and beaten with me, because when they are beaten, when they are bloody in the streets, then they will fight for all of our progress, right? Those who in power see the marginalization of all, and they say, well, we've got to fix the problem. So it is a necessary evil. It is a necessary action for us to take, for us to band together with those who are outside of our community, for us, our community, to get progress. It's just pragmatic. At the end of the day, as my time winds down to an end, I urge you as black people, as black men in particular, support our black women. Again, to ask our black women to bear more of a burden that they already have, to push further than they already have, is absolutely absurd. We have to support our progress as a whole. Thank you.
So the first reason why you should be voting in favor of the negative is that the affirmative must prove that African American women are the sole future of progress. We've went back and forth with metaphors, but at the end of the day, we can see that in this round, the resolution clearly states the affirmative's burden, and that is to prove African American women as the sole future of progress, which they have yet to do. The second reason why you should vote in favor of the negative is the weighing mechanism set in place by the affirmative. So today, you were supposed to be weighing today's round off of the preponderance of evidence. If you look at the two cases, the negative provides you with much more evidence and much more quality evidence that supports our case. So when you're looking in terms of preponderance of evidence, the negative wins in that realm as well. The third reason why you should be voting in favor of the negative is that it's time for everyone to support the African American women. We have done too much for too long to not have every other demographic in America supporting us. Our plight is one that we should not burden and shoulder on our own. It's one that we need to share with everyone else. While everyone may not be responsible for what we've dealt with in the past, every single American should be held accountable for our future. And that is what the negative is here to say. The fourth reason why you should be voting in favor of the negative is that without the support of people from other demographics, every single movement the affirmative stated would not be possible. When we look at Me Too, we look at the huge influence that Hollywood and white stars had on it. When we look at women's suffrage, we look at black men and Martin Luther King and what he did to support it. When you look at all of our movements, you'll see that social progress is only possible when everyone works together. It's never just one group by themselves. The fourth reason why you should be voting in favor of the negative is that our arguments went completely untouched. So the idea that this debate, this idea of just solely considering women and men in the future excludes binary people and only further exacerbates the oppression held by these individuals means did not have any clash on the affirmative. The next argument that we made was that women in general are stronger together and that we as a society are stronger together. The affirmative did not provide any clash. And as we know in debate, when you don't contend, you affirm, you agree with us. So in that realm, the negative also wins. And the last reason why you should be voting in favor of the negative is, I'm going to quote Issa Rae here, who is a show writer, a producer, and a fellow black queen, who states that I'm rooting for everyone black, regardless of their gender, regardless of their anything else that they bring to the table. We are rooting for black people in general. We are rooting for everyone coming together, regardless of their gender, to provide for a future that includes us all. And with that, I yield the rest of my time.
Great. So really quickly, I'm going to address an issue that seems to keep floating around about this resolution. May I add that the affirmative is the only team today that has upheld the resolution. So with that being said, we cannot argue or prepare an argumentation that has nothing to do with the resolution. So when we say, look back at the soul thing, refer back to my question about the pen, saying that it adds only a specific, meaning that we're talking about a specific issue. As we know, the framers' intent of today's argumentation is about the issue of African American women, as that is why the affirmative has prepared an entire case about the progression of African American women. The entire argumentation proposed by the negative is them trying to all lives matter this. But right now, in this debate, we're talking about black women. We're talking about African American lives. So to vote for the negative is simply to vote for an all lives matter type of argumentation. They do. We're not saying they don't, but we're talking about what is specific to this debate today. So, and the whole point of this debate is to start a dialogue about specific issues. That was the point of the. So now that we've cleared that out the way, let's go ahead and go to our first voter, which is we see that the negation's job or burden in NPDA regulations is to offer clash, which they have not done. They've conceded to contentions 1 and 2, saying, agree, yes, this is true. We agree to this. So what are you offering for us to clash against with that? You're taking away the burden of the affirmative. We can't rebut anything if you're simply just agreeing to it. You're not doing your job. Then we look at the third contention that goes completely untouched. They don't even reference the current leaders. So then we look at their voter number 2 of their inclusivity argument, which gets solved, as my partner stated, and as I stated, with the Black Lives Matter, who includes black men. That also includes the black women who started Me Too. That includes Terry Crews, Reese Witherspoon, which they mentioned in their argumentation. If you want to argue for inclusivity, we're arguing about something that is specific. We mentioned the specific of the black woman starting it. We're not saying that black women are the only people who have benefited from it, though. So the inclusivity argument flows over to the affirmative. Then we look at the third voter, which is the fourth voter. The negation second constructive is a prime example of what's wrong in our inclusivity argumentation. The negation second constructive boldly stated women can't do it. So we see that we face oppression not only from white people or other cultures, but also in our own community. That's why it's the issue of Black or African American women being the future of progress, because we see in this debate that's supposed to be about progress, we're being told that we can't do it, that black women are supposed to wait around and wait and see if somebody else will fight our fight for us. So we see today, adjudicators, that this entire debate was strictly abusive for the negation to ask us to do the impossible and say that there is no other person contributing to progress. As we see that there are people of other cultures in this crowd today, we would see that that's a lie, adjudicator, because they're advocating for this argumentation, they're advocating for this dialogue. That is progression. So if we're to ask us or to try to back us into a hole and say that and do something that goes against the exact resolution, which asks us only to say that African American women are the face of African American women's progression, that is crazy. The specificity of the means that we're talking about a specific issue, a specific group of people. To ask us to wait like some damsel in distress and let somebody else solve our issues is not going to be the future of progress today. So we look at it for all those reasons, the fact that the negation has not done their job and has not negated any of them. They have one sole duty, and that is to negate, replace, refute our case. They did not touch it. They conceded to 2 points, meaning that they agree with our case, and then the third one went untouched, so we know that that's also a virtue of affirmation. Then we look at their argumentation of inclusivity, which we saw for under the affirmative. Then we look at it through the third point of the negation, second constructive, being a prime example of the issue we face in intersectionality, telling us what we can't do, what we must do. And a debate that's supposed to be about progression? Gallery, I ask that you just bear with me because I can't believe it. We are supposed to be advocating for progression, having an educational dialogue, but the negation has no interest in education. That's why our value is intersectionality. Because we see that at the intersection of oppression, black women stand right there. That means that they have to be the people that build the bridge for more people to come along, because we have faced for so long the crooks of oppression. And we must not wait for somebody else to solve our issues for us. And with that being said, I urge an affirmative ballot.
A lot of times, every time we have these debates, some people in the audience and debate team members always want us to decide who won the debate. And we always say, which you will find true at the end of this debate, the community wins. But as audience members who do want or have feelings, you'll know who hits it on the nail for you. We're going to give up this mic, and we want to have comments from the audience. Any comments out there?
I agree that African American women are the face of progress in the 21st century, especially millennial African American women. I read somewhere that their statistics show that they're the highest educated demographic in this generation. So my question is, I think it's for the negative. I think that's what you guys are. I was hearing a lot of what we need, how we need people to support, but we've come this far and we haven't had support. We generally have had lack of support, and we've been able to get this far. So going forward in this new millennium, how can we self-sufficiently make that progress without the need of anybody else, or without the need of asking for assistance?
So I think that there is no fair way of gauging, but what we do know is that we do better together, right? So we know that we do better together. So although black women may have progressed thus far by themselves, you might say, without proper help, but of course they would rather have help, right? You would rather have assistance. You would rather have appreciation, celebration. So although you may be able to elevate without the proper support, but who doesn't want the support? So I think that that would be the better gauge on it, is you may not need it, but it's definitely desired.
So, I mean, I sort of piggybacking off of what Coach Wendell just said. I also think we have to define it as, are we going to live in a segregated society? Is that the future that we want? Or is that the current situation that we're in and we're progressing towards a more inclusive future? So it's on the path of which path do we take? Do we take the old Malcolm X or do we take the reform Malcolm X? And so the progress is measured when we can measure society, how the oppressed people in society have progressed relative to the other people who were doing the oppression. And so it's sort of like Malcolm X said, we measure the progress not when we pull the knife out the back, but when the healing begins. And so that's sort of like, are we going to look at it as us being a nation on our own, or are we going to say we're going to fulfill the American dream, which is everyone having equal opportunity? And so that's sort of like how we should, in my opinion, measure progress.
Now I'm piggybacking on him, what he said about Malcolm X, because I was sitting here thinking about the reform Malcolm X also said that there couldn't be any black-white unity until there was first black and on black unity, which is something that we have a problem with. Until we can have unity among our own selves, it's impossible for you to link up with somebody else for anything. Now last night I was looking at TBN, and the only thing that they was talking about at that particular time was about the Jews and the struggle that they're having over in Israel. And I was thinking about, what about the struggles that we have right here? And I understand, I don't know any Jews personally, and I don't have anything against the Jewish nation, but I do know that we have problems that are significant to our own self. Until I solve my problem, how can I help somebody else solve theirs?
You know, this is all, so when I was asked to take over this museum, make it tangible, get a building, etc., been around for a while and nothing really tangible had happened. Since they asked me, I could say how I wanted it to be. And the first thing that I did was say, we're changing this mission of this museum from the normal American history through an African American lens to a multicultural conversation on race geared towards a common future. And I think that when we say that, that doesn't, and given that we have every race, gender represented over my 10 years in this building, because it is a complete story that we have to give. Having said that, it's easy enough to say that when my first staff here was multicultural and now it's all black, it's because the reality is that if I'm going to impact the African American community towards a better common good, then I need to respect the fact that the museum industry is blonde. And if I'm going to give any opportunity to people, it would have to be black. And so I'm trying to get to your point, which is that we're constantly in a position, and there was a young woman, Muslim woman, who did something on Instagram this past month, where she said, listen, it's not like I'm against anybody else to say that I'm pro-black. And it gets to a point that when you have to defend, to even make the statement that it's not even understood, that for you to say, hey, how come these folks seem to be getting all this attention and our condition stays the same? You don't have to defend that. I don't think we have to defend that. Progress, if we want to know what progress is to be able to say, as every interest group, as every group in this country, this is our problem and it's not being solved, and what do we do about it, and how do we come together in a multicultural conversation, because this is a multicultural country, in a multicultural conversation to reach a common good on it. And I think that's okay.
So this kind of goes back, I guess, into the affirmatives argumentation today, where we mentioned how there's this kind of notion that people like to all lives matter things. Of course, we want allies. Of course, we want to be able to have people fighting at our side. But the argumentation isn't necessarily against allies. It's against waiting on somebody else to do it for us. So when I think about this with the whole Black Lives Matter thing, if Black lives truly matter to the public, we wouldn't have to remind people. We wouldn't have to say it. It would just go without saying. We wouldn't have to say, no, all lives matter. Well, if they did, we wouldn't have to remind you that Black lives matter. So with that being said, when we think about the plight of African American women, which we're talking about here today, it's simply, no, it's not that we're trying to reject allies. We're just saying for us, by us, meaning that we know our struggle better than anybody else in the world. So we're supposed to be at the forefront of paving the way because we have it on both sides. We don't have equal pay. We don't have equal rights to our bodies. And we don't have justice in our supposed justice system. So we have it on both sides. And what I'm saying is nobody else can tell you how bad your day went besides you. So with that being said, of course, we're supposed to be the future of progression simply because of the fact that we have been the most oppressed when we look at throughout all of history. And we're not saying that we don't want allies because it's going to reach. I mean, Martin Luther King once said, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So, of course, the smart man would join in a cause because he knows that he might be the next oppressed group. Oppression spreads rapidly. So with that being said, no, it's not like we're advocating against allies. We're just saying that we are going to lead the charge. Simply that.